Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Championship Leadership Podcast. And I'm excited today. Our guest from Anaheim, California, just recently moved from Toronto, was for many years, the past 7 years or so, inside of design and renovations, and now is making transformations inside of people's lives. As a transformation coach, she's got a top 50 podcast that you need to check out, the Hero Academy podcast. And you can catch her at Veronika Abrams, which is VERONIKAABRAMS. And of course, we'll get this all tied up inside of the show notes so that you can just click the link as well. But with that said, Veronika Abrams, thank you so much for being here. Really excited.
Thank you, Nate, for having me. I really appreciate it,
Yeah,
and I'm so excited.
absolutely. And so I always love to just kind of kick the conversation off with this first question to get it started. The show is called Championship Leadership. So what comes to mind for you, and what do you think of, like, what does championship leadership mean to you when you hear it?
When I think of championship leadership, I think of courage, and courage I really feel is it's humble, but it's gracious as well too. So with leadership, with business, you've got to put aside the fact that you're afraid of something and just jump and do it. And in leadership too, I've led, I've been in a male dominated industry, and with clients, with contractors, making sure that you've got respect. It's not saying that you're a know-it-all, but hey, like, I'll figure that out, or do you need help with this? So really leading in a gracious way, and being humble. If you don't know everything, people aren't looking for that. They're really looking for somebody to partner with them. So, and to understand. So being the person that is able to connect with them and build rapport, and also able to, you know, show them the way, because you're the person who's got to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that definition. And so courage popped out as you were telling me what you think about championship leadership. And so maybe you could tell us, the listeners, a little bit more about you and your story. I know you've talked about overcoming depression and addiction, and I imagine there's a fair amount of courage that has to come from deep within someone to be able to face some of those things and to also help others to do the same. So maybe, yeah, just tell us a little bit about your story and kind of where you've come from and how along that path you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background was actually in biogenetics. I realized after doing that it was not going to be my passion. It did not click with me. And instead of just fighting against that, I said, you know what, let me explore these creative passions that everybody said, hey, you can't make money from. So from there, I actually, after school, I did a semester of interior design, but the summer before, I was like, okay, what do I do? I got student debt, and and I don't have really, a degree that I can use. So what am I going to do? And I knew I loved design renovations. My brother is 12 years older than me, built homes. I installed my first floor at like 14. Like, I was handy.
Yeah.
And so what I did, and this is in Canada, I was February, I believe. So it was one of the coldest winters. I had boots on and the whole outfit, everything,
Yeah.
hat down, almost covering my eyes, scarf up over my nose kind of deal. And I started going door to door and asking people if they had any summer projects that they'd like, potentially to get a quote on. And these were simple jobs like painting and kind of coordinating colors and that sort of thing, because that's what I knew. And yeah, so from going door to door, I booked, I think, the most part, I think about 65 to 70K worth of work. And most of that was within like 3-4 weeks time. And this
Uh-huh.
was, finishing my last term of school. So in the evenings, going door to door. I think part of it was people really just feeling sorry for me. But that being said, yeah, I got into design and renovations, and I did that for 7 years. I built a business to where I had, a few teams, went more into kitchen design renovations. And although my business life, I everybody was looking at me, and I was being, I was very successful. There was a time, uh, around my 30th birthday a few years ago, where everything kind of fell apart in my personal life. And within the span of 6 weeks, my mother moved away, which is, fine. It's okay. These things happen.
Hmm.
My partner came to me and said he wasn't in love with me anymore. So that relationship ended. And because I'd been so invested in business, my whole friend circle was gone. My best friend and her husband moved to Europe the day before my birthday. And then I turned 30 to the sound of crickets. Oh, yeah, in 6 weeks, it all kind of fell apart
Yeah.
and I spiraled for a time. I was dealing with severe depression, anxiety, alcohol, drug addiction. I kind of was like, you hit that point in your life and you're like, well, I feel like I did everything right and here I am. So there was a lot of bitterness there.
Hmm.
Um, and then, eventually I had to pick up, put my big girl pants on and say, hey, I got to figure this out. And that's what I did.
Great. I love it. So what was what was the big shift for you to move from Toronto to all the way to California? That's a big journey. It's a big step. And
Yeah,
how,
absolutely.
yeah, how's that transformation been going for you?
Oh, it's been great. I mean, that's the thing. So I went through my own transformation journey, and I had to get back to what's my identity, and also how do I curate my life. I think we're so particular when it comes to business. So I took a lot of those business practices and I applied them to my life, and then I realized, in this next phase of my life, I really want to collaborate and connect with people who are also interested in supporting others in their own transformation journey. I made a commitment at the beginning of mine where I said, if I figure this out, then I'm going to use my knowledge to help other people. And it seemed like the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, just wouldn't let me forget it. And people came into my life, opportunities. And long story short, I'm here. And I have such a supportive group of friends and partner who believe in this message of transformation and finding your identity and developing your own self-confidence. So that's really what I'm here for, and it's been wonderful.
That's great. Yeah. And, thank you for sharing that. And it's important, yes, to have people that do believe in you and support you along the way. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, and who have been some of the people that have really either directly or indirectly made a difference on you, on inside of your life. We talk about championship leaders. So yeah, who are some of those championship leaders, that coaches, mentors, people again that have maybe directly, indirectly impacted your life? And really more importantly, like, what was it about them? What were some of the characteristics or traits that they've had that have really helped you to make the shift, and that maybe even you've taken from them to help mold you into the coach, the leader that you are?
Yeah, so a big one for me is Ed Milet. And I remember again at the beginning where I was like, you know what, I gotta figure this out. And here I am, like I was addicted to some pretty hard drugs and alcohol, and I knew I had a problem. But
What kind
I
of
did.
drugs were you addicted to?
So for me, it was like alcohol during the day and like at night to pass out, and like Coke during the day. Here I am, I'm operating a business. It's not like I was
Oh,
partying. I was isolated,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay.
So
Right.
I was, and I also, my background's in bio. So I know the chemistry, and I also know like, how to do something so that it's not, gonna be too obvious. So I'm not really ashamed to say that, but I was kind of like being smart-ish about
No, I was
it.
just gonna say, is that something like you're being smart with your drug addiction, which is, I mean, I think you hear that story a lot with people that have been addicted. But yeah, it's just interesting to
Yeah, and
see
that's the thing too, is
background
nobody
on that.
looked at me. Yeah, nobody looked at me and knew, really.
Yeah,
Very few people
yeah.
knew about what was going on. So here I am, I'm completely isolated. And I'm like, I definitely need people to speak into my life. So what do? You turn on, YouTube, you listen to podcasts like yours, like mine, and there's no excuse. There are these leaders and you have access to them. We live in this wonderful day and age where you
Hmm.
can listen to Tony Robbins, you can listen to Ed Milet, you can put on Tom Bilyeu, you can put on these podcasts. And I knew I couldn't change necessarily the circumstances of my life overnight, but I knew that I could take control of the influences around me. And because I'm in a bit of a smaller town, a little bit outside of Toronto, but I didn't have those people supporting me, those friends. Like I said, everybody was gone. But I made a conscious choice to connect any way I could. So that was, Ed Milet. And I loved how he brought on these guests. And this is where also Hero Academy podcast comes from. And you hear these amazing stories, but you're not just hearing the highlight reel, you're hearing the struggles behind. So me in my state, I was able to see myself and then feel hope. So people like him, people like you, um, that's really who I was connecting with and allowing to influence and put input, and little by little between my own choices of, trying to eat healthier and all these kinds of things. I think it was about 5 months. I eventually was drug free, exercising, eating healthy, back on track. And yes, there was those people. And then even through Instagram, I have so many people I've connected to and are friends that I honestly could probably even call up and say, hey, like I need somebody to talk to, and I haven't met them in person.
Yeah.
So in the last 6 weeks, I've moved here and I'm I'm starting to actually meet people in person. But, people talk about social media like, oh, it's this horrible. You can curate your social media just like you can curate your friends in person.
Yeah,
You can connect
absolutely.
with amazing people. So those are a lot of my heroes have been, through podcasts and YouTube, and then people that I've connected with through Instagram.
I love it. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that's so important to say is like, you didn't really, I, I I believe what you were saying is that like a lot of these people that were impacting you were indirectly, right? You didn't necessarily have personal relationships with them, but there is so much information. Like there's so much at the really in our at the at disposal in the palm of our hand at our fingertips that we can access today, that there really isn't any excuse if you really do want the help, right? I think that's probably the key, number one, right? A lot of people might say that they want the help, but they're really not ready for it. So, and I'm sure that's something that you really deal with. What, when you say transformation coach, maybe paint us a little bit different or a bigger, broader, more clear picture of like, what kind of transformation are you talking about? What kind of help are you, do you provide to your clients?
So when I say transformation, I mean, you have to get to a point where you understand that you are unhappy with how your life has been going, and you want to establish a foundation of high performance habits and healthy habits so that you can create the momentum to build the life that you want. Everybody wants, it has different goals and that sort of thing. But I think on a foundational level, there are these patterns that we get into that we know are self-destructive. I was definitely in a self-destructive state. So whether it's, addiction or poor health habits or, our environment, just setting that plain, foundation so that you can feel that sense of confidence. Because, if you listen to Ed Milet, he talks about how the way you build confidence is by learning to keep promises to yourself. And I think that's really the beginning of transformation, is taking personal responsibility and saying, hey, I want more out of life. And I know I need to establish a history of starting to keep promises to myself. And so I use my background also in bio and an understanding of the human psychology and even just biology of how we're wired. And I use that to help people break their self-sabotaging habits and start putting in place those high-performing habits that are going to support them. And then they could take that and grow from that and accomplish the goals that they have.
That's awesome. I love it. So what is like, you're on this path, you're helping people to break some self-sabotaging patterns that they have and to really go from where they are to where they want to be, right? And that's really what a coach does. So what's the big vision for you? Like, what kind of impact do you want to make? Where do you want to go? What are you really hoping to accomplish, let's say even over the next 5 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm moving actually from one-on-one coaching to speaking. So this is, again, why I've moved here. So I want to take that transformation journey and those principles that I've learned. I put a lot of my worksheets actually on my website for free. So you can download things like the core values worksheet or the environment audit and these kinds of things. So my word for 2020 is give. So all these things I've learned, and there was something that just didn't feel aligned with putting it within some sort of a one-on-one package. I just felt like I wasn't making enough of an impact. So I've taken those things, I put them on for free. Same with the podcast, those transformation stories that I heard on Ed's show.
Yeah.
Um, I want to connect with people like that. And I also want to bring those kinds of guests on my show.
Yeah.
So that's really the premise of Hero Academy podcast. So I want people to feel encouraged. And oftentimes we need to hear those struggles and those things that other people have gone through so that we can see ourselves in their story, know that there's hope. So that story of hope, of transformation, and the actual tactics, the things that I learned and I used in order to break through those patterns in my own life and also with my clients. I want to just be able to get on stage and I want to just speak to people and I want to see breakthroughs happen within moments rather than months or
Yeah.
years. So that's my passion right now. I really just want to serve people. I've got a couple books on my heart as well, so
Yeah.
that's my motivation.
Yeah, well, that's usually one of the questions I love to ask is like, when is the book coming out? So that is something that you're thinking about. Do you have an idea for what the first book will be?
So I know I've got two books on my heart. And so the first one really is kind of this, the story of my own transformation journey,
Mm-hmm.
and the ups and downs, the ugly parts in between, and just giving a raw, um, chronicle of what happened. But I think we oftentimes we look at our lives and we're like, why me? Like, what is it about me that makes me special? I'm looking at my struggles and I'm thinking, I'm the wrong person for this,
Yeah.
message. I'm the wrong person to help others. That's crazy. But I really strongly believe that on the other side of your struggles, you're the teacher. And the thing that you think disqualifies you is actually the thing that gives you authority. So I want to tell that story so that people can see, hey, if you're struggling with money, you've got a prosperity story to tell. If you're struggling with addiction, then you've got a freedom story to tell, So that's really what the first book would be about. And the next one is going to be a lot of like victory,
Yeah.
a lot of victory stories. So it's like, the mucky stuff and getting through that. And then, the other side of really stepping into that full identity of who you are.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. And will those be happening this year?
This year I feel like it's going to be mostly the speaking and podcast. And I think I've got a lot myself to learn. And I mean, for podcasting, I'll be honest, as I'm getting guests on, it's oftentimes a little bit selfish as well. Cause I'm in this place where I'm really wanting to learn and grow as well. So I'm taking people on that journey with me. So I don't really know when that would be, but
Yeah.
it's in the beginning stages. We'll see.
All right. This is a question that I always love to ask, and we all have critical moments and turning points in our life that, I always call it like that fork in the road moment where we really know that we want to go like right, and that's kind of that road less traveled. And then there's oftentimes we're feeling pulled by everyone else to maybe go what is perceived as a safe route, but really, for what you want and for who you want to be, it's not the safe play at all. And it's one that often ends in regret when you look back later, wishing you would have taken the route that you really wanted to. So, can you think of a moment where obviously you did make the decision you did, and it has you right where you are right today, but had you not, you could be in a very different place. And I think it's powerful for the listeners to hear these stories because many of them are in that moment right now. And they're struggling with that decision. They know what they kind of want to do or they should do, whether it's God or the voice or their gut or the intuition, whatever they want to call it. But yet they got, sometimes people are good-hearted and good intentioned. Like, no, you should really do this. This is a safe play, but really, it's not great for what they want, right? But they don't know any different. So yeah, is there a moment that really sticks out to you that you could share with us?
So, I mean, I made a lot of mistakes. I very clearly have told you some of my past. So there's been a lot of that, but I'm going to tell you sort of an aha moment for me, or one of the things that made a huge difference. And this is how I self-audit now at this point. And I think that it's made a huge, huge difference in my life. So I'll try to get it through it, relatively quickly. But we believe this lie that if you are a good person, you will have a good life. And that's not true. Anybody who has a good heart has said at times in their life, I'm a good person, I don't deserve this, or why am I like here and like, I'm with this person and they don't treat me well, or with this employer and so, and I don't deserve this, right? So let's just come to a point where we understand that's a big freaking lie. And So when I realized that, and I was like, well, how do I actually curate and create the life that I feel that I deserve and that is aligned, with things that are very close to my heart?
Hmm.
And too often we audit our life by feelings. And the thing is, if you have self-limiting beliefs, you're going to have self-limiting feelings. So you cannot trust your feelings until you've really gotten to a point where you feel like you've crushed a lot of those self-limiting beliefs. That being said, I realize that, what's really trendy for businesses, and we see oftentimes, is discovering what your core values are. Why is it, so important to identify your core values? One, it helps you know if you're on trajectory with what it is that you want in your goals. And two, it helps you curate the culture within your company. So why don't we, it took like 30 plus years for me to come to a point where I could say what my core values are. Well, no wonder I didn't know if I was on trajectory. No wonder I wasn't really intentionally cultivating the culture of my life. So core values have been such a turning point for me. So I've got a worksheet at veronicaabrams.com. There's like a free resources thing there. So you could just download it for free. So there's a core values worksheet, and it's got a list of like 250 or so core values. You don't need all that many, but pick
Yeah.
five, go through that list and just see what really jumps out at you. Pick five. And mine, the first three were easy for me. The last couple, I actually took a little while to kind of figure out. And
Uh-huh.
that's okay. Rush it. You don't rush it. And these things can
Right.
change over time. But mine are love, integrity, gratitude, courage, and authenticity. So instead of going by my feelings, what I said is, does this align with my core values? And then you define those things. And I call those guiding principles. So those are my core values. For example, love, to operate from a place of kindness, compassion, and respect towards others and myself. So that being said, for example, if you're in a relationship or you got friends who are not being loving towards you, it is up to you to make a choice of, creating distance there, finding new friends that do align. You are basically a city and there's a gate, and you are the king, queen, whatever you want to call yourself, and you are in charge of the culture within that. How are you going to establish that culture? Understand what your core values are and revert back to those. And that right there made all the difference in my life, and my life completely transformed as I started making choice, not in alignment with my feelings, but in alignment with my core values.
Yeah, that's powerful, and thank you. I think that's really important. And again, what's the resource that you have that they can go check out?
Yeah. So if you go to veronicaabrams.com, there's free downloads section there. So you just go there and there's a whole bunch of worksheets. The core values worksheet, take that, write them down so that you've got a glossary that you can use, and then also questions and ways that you can define them. And then put those on your mirror on a sticky note. Put them. I had it on my phone. I had it on my phone as a wallpaper. I had it in my desktop back. This is how you get things to really, really sink deep. Like, have it everywhere. Write them out. I had like in the bathroom, in the kitchen, on the fridge.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. It's a way to really get it to ingrain into who you are, right? So what's
Absolutely.
what are maybe one or two things that you could leave as we do wrap this up, like, yeah, guiding principles, just things that you live by that if they were to implement today would help them move forward inside their life today?
So, another thing when it comes to creating high performing habits is we, what we do is we value grand gestures over consistency. So whatever your goal is, whether it's fitness or whether it's, doing outreach for your business or whatever, take your goal and distill it down to something that's simple and not as intimidating as the big goal. Because the way our brain works and, our fight and flight response is we just get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So for you to, let's say, implement a 5 to 10 to 15 minute everyday workout rather than a 1 hour 3 times a week for the next 10, this is why people give up after 10 days or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So if you can be compassionate with yourself, this is super important with building high performing habits, and take your goal, dissect it as something small, have a no days off 7, 14, or 21 day streak. And once you've had your streak, then tack on more time or tack on another meal or
Yeah.
tack on another, So if you were to take your goal and don't do I'm going to start this date, but do a 30, 60, 90 day ramp up, you will actually be able to establish that so much better, and it'll be more long lasting than having a start date. It's super important with creating those neural pathways. It's not fancy, it's not Hollywood, but these are the things that work.
Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate that. Yeah, it's important to know, like, yeah, it's not fancy. And oftentimes the things that really work and do transform our lives and change them for the better are, they're not sexy, they're not fancy, they're really simple.
That's true.
But I know I have that tendency to like, well, if it's this simple and it works, maybe if I make it a little more complex, it'll work even better. And that's where people fall off. So I appreciate you sharing those with us and being here today. Again, could you just remind us where we could find more about you, follow you as we wrap this up?
Yeah. So best thing now as I'm learning and growing is Hero Academy podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely tune in there on Instagram at Veronika Abrams and my whole name, .com. If you want to download resources, I've got a good handful of worksheets there. I've also got a manifesto worksheet and the manifestation formula, which I think people look at manifestation as very woo-woo, but I believe it's understanding your values, then your goals, then applying consistency and aligned action.
Awesome. And I think your dog was trying to say hi to us there in the background. So
Yeah, he's in the bedroom, but he's got
what
a
kind of
loud,
dog do you have?
a Frenchie. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. That's great. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed it. And we will get all of that definitely linked up in the show notes and just really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be with us here today. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Nate. I appreciate you having me and this has been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Have a great day.